Hey, welcome to the Heathen DriveBYE, everybody. Today we got Suris and Prophet of Zod on here, and they wanted to talk about their religious past. How are you doing, Zod?
I am good. Sorry, I had to shut it off.
That's
I heard
why
it
it's
twice.
loud. Johnny's loud, and I can barely hear. I can barely hear
Back
Zod.
up?
Am I too quiet?
You're too quiet, and Johnny's too loud.
Is that better?
That sounds a little more equalized.
Is that better? Okay.
But I have no idea how bad mine is.
You sound.
Yeah, you sound fine to me. Do I sound okay now?
Yes.
All right,
Okay.
cool.
So how you doing, Zod?
Good. Just sitting here like a professional doing a mic check on the air.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a problem here. I'm still showing my thing up there, like some color correction display thing or something or another, and that's not really who I want to be. But anyway, and Suris, how are you doing?
I am here. I'm alive, and I'm dealing with a cat who just got his balls lopped. Fixed.
Oh, I bet she's screaming.
He's
something.
He's feeling weird. I'm fairly certain.
I bet.
Just had to replace all the litter with dust-free litter because open
your
wounds.
second code got cracked by chaosism already.
Yeah, it did. But the good news is people are only allowed to crack codes once, so chaosism is now ineligible from cracking harder codes.
Hey, he's a pretty smart guy.
Yeah, that's what it seems like. The first guy got it, and then within a week and a half, the second guy got it. I'm just like, well, it's going to be a whole lot harder for you guys to find the next one.
Well, anyway,
meanwhile, Johnny gets awkward on air.
Yeah, you guys wanted to talk about your religious past, and I don't really have one, so.
Zod, let's hear about you.
Yeah, let's hear about your past, man.
All right, I'm creeped out now.
You're creeped out now?
Yeah. Well, how do I sum the whole thing up?
How about we start with a question? Probably easy instead of trying to sum the entire thing up. So I guess the first question would be, I know that you were a principal at a Christian school, but I did not know if you had also been part of the education system as a student.
Yes, I was.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I actually grew up from kindergarten through 12th grade. I went to Christian school. So I think a similar thing to you, except I understand you went to a big fancy Christian school.
I like to call it a compound.
Yeah. Which was different than any Christian school. At least most Christian schools that I've been exposed to. I went to basically one of those ones that was just a few rooms inside the church. And the pastor's basement when we needed it and stuff like that. So.
No, this was a multi-story, multi-level, multifaceted building. Multiple lunchrooms, multiple libraries. Like, this thing is huge.
Yeah, that's what the pastor at the school I was a principal for, he was going for something like that. But they ended up laying a foundation and running out of money. And as far as I know, there's a foundation where he wants to have a, bookstore and library and all this fancy stuff, which I kind of get a kick out of.
Yeah, I can't say that PCA ever ran out of money. They are loaded.
Yeah.
whoever became principal is very well off.
He'd go in front of the congregation and try to blame it on the government, of course, and they ate that up. But
the government doesn't like God. They don't like Jesus. They didn't want me to make my thing. They didn't give me the public funding that them evolutionism schools gave. Am I close enough? Am I accurate?
Yeah, he said something about they required some $2 million. I don't know. He's a good bullshitter.
He didn't feel like dealing with government regulations with his government-regulated building.
With him, you never knew what it was because he's always selling the congregation on some angle or another. So,
he's very duplicitous.
Yeah, I would say so.
But, sounds like a good guy.
Yeah. Well, no. To be literal, no. But yeah, so to answer your question, though, I went to a Christian school. I went to a different one, which was actually in the same community. It was a Pentecostal Christian school, and which I'll talk about that whole thing with Godless Iowan, I guess, tomorrow.
Yeah.
The whole speaking in tongues aspect and everything. But yeah, it was a little thing that had been set up in the local church, and basically my whole life experience was within that church and that school, up until I was left for college, basically. So
Yeah, mine was slightly different because for me, I managed to get out after the 6th grade. We had so there was a magnet school that I wanted to go to. I've dealt with advanced schooling my entire life, so like what the actual public education system looks like, I'm not 100% certain. But there was a magnet school I wanted to go to, mainly because they had a shadowing program where if you had not heard of the school or gone to the school before, you were allowed to shadow one of the other students there for a day to see if you would be a good fit for their school. So I shadowed one day, and the kids there were so much more free than the ones that I had grown up with. Because at PCA, if you left the classroom, it was only because you left in a line with a group of other children and you were holding their hands until about 4th grade, when they felt like that was too sexual. Once holding hands became too sexual, then they stopped you from doing it. But they still made you walk around in double file lines, girls on one side, boys on another. And like the dress code was strict. You couldn't have any images on your, like even your shirt being just somewhat plaid would not have been allowed.
wow.
It had to be solid. For the most part, they wanted you to have solid color and solid everything because they considered anything aside from that a distraction. So you couldn't have pictures on your shirts or anything.
If you're distracted by this, there's a problem that runs deeper than clothing, I think. But
well, and that's the same thing like saying that, oh no, your 15-year-old can't wear spaghetti straps in school. I think there's a problem a little deeper. And the problem might be with the teacher and the staff more so than with the students.
yeah.
But yeah,
so nobody could even like be excused to use the restroom or anything like that?
If you did, it was very hard to. Most of the time they didn't want you to. And if you were excused to go to the restroom, there were patrols in the halls anyway. Because they had to make sure that you didn't touch the walls, because that was one of the other rules that we had for some reason. The walls that they had were these weird, like, bumpy texture walls that, like, if you pressed your fingernail into them for even a second, it would, like, shred it. So they had these, I don't really know how to explain it. I guess kind of like, no, I really don't know how to explain this. It's just essentially kind of a really wavy, bumpy wall texture that they just didn't want messed up. But that whole school was weird. Like, the outside brick is all facade. It was actually like a 1/2 inch of plaster over styrofoam over actual brick. That way they could have the school be pink and orange because those colors are great, apparently.
Weird.
Yeah, it was a very strange environment.
Before we go on, just to keep things moving, if anybody in the chat has questions, I would encourage you guys to ask something. We kind of got to keep it rapid fire because I have to leave in half an hour. So if anybody does have any specific questions they want to ask for us, then we're open to do that. Yeah, we were allowed to, I think, have a little bit of freedom of movement, not much at all, except one year, which was kind of strange. When I was in junior high, somebody wrote a slightly degrading message on somebody's desk. And so they couldn't figure out who it was. So they locked down our entire classroom and kept us isolated from the rest of the school, where we had to do basically like what you did and line up to use the restroom all together. But other than that, during lunches, breaks, anything else, we had to be in our same room so that the evil wouldn't spread to the rest of the school.
Were you allowed to talk at lunch?
Yeah.
You had one up over me, sir. We were not allowed to talk at lunch. Talking at recess, talking was somewhat allowed, though conversations were strictly controlled. Mm-hmm. Because teachers would patrol around during recess and filter conversations. So if I mentioned the word Pokemon, I got detention that day and I was not allowed to speak for the rest of the day. And then if you were at PE, separate from recess, if you were at PE, talking was not allowed. Even if you were playing like kickball, a sport that requires at least a modicum of communication, that communication was not allowed. And you would get in trouble if you communicated. And then for lunch, no talking allowed at all during the last handful of minutes. They would have what's called talk time, where you would now be allowed to speak to the people directly next to you but not necessarily the people across from you.
Huh. Weird.
You see why when I saw like something that was close to the public education system afterwards, there was this huge juxtaposition to me, because what I dealt with was, total control of every facet of your life. And then something that was very opposite of that.
Yeah, we didn't have anything quite that crazy as far as day-to-day lockdown. We were allowed to talk and be a little noisy at recess and lunch and stuff like that. They just zeroed in on anything. Like you'd instantly get a spanking for, say, gossiping or anything like that. They would get really worked up if you weren't worshipful. They were targeted more at thinking you had an intense relationship with God, or ensuring that you did.
So you guys had corporeal punishment?
Yeah. Corporal. Yeah.
That's something that we didn't actually have at ours. Ours was all, I think during my last year, I had almost 100 detentions.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what their form of punishments were always: in-school suspension, never out of school suspension, in-school suspension, detention, writing lines, stuff like that. They tried their hardest not to actually touch the kids, and I think maybe it's because they towed a line earlier on, because I've heard from people who went to PCA years before that they used to have paddles and rulers that they used, so I feel like maybe they got in trouble.
That went out of style a couple years after I had left, I think. So I think it was on the way out and was probably long gone by a decade or two by the time you were in school.
True. You are quite older than I am.
Yes. But yeah, we would be spanked for anything that was a deliberate, for gossip, for lying, any deliberate disobedience of a rule. Even if there was a bit of misinterpretation. And most of this happened. I had never been spanked up until 7th grade. And then there was a change in administration to some people who were very intense. And I think one thing I didn't recognize until I became a principal was that the school staff is extremely nervous because of the standard they have to uphold.
She's saying hi to both you and Mrs. Snarky since she's messaging in the YouTube chat.
Yeah, I didn't know she was waving at me, but I thought I should wave back just to make sure I'm not rude. But I'm
gonna sit back a bit.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. To change a little bit, because there's a whole other can of worms here. Somebody asked a question about curriculum at the schools, like what was it like?
Ooh, I think both you and I have the same answer here, and that is A. Becca.
Yeah. We started with a Becca, and then we changed to Bob Jones, which I don't think was a tremendous improvement. I think they're mostly along the same mold as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I think they have a lot of the same. Like, I think one actually has authors that left one of the companies to go to the other, so it's pretty much the same ordeal. I'm gonna adjust myself because I'm very uncomfortable. Okay, Gravity, fuck off. Anyway, so yeah, curriculum-wise, I know that for me, math was very accelerated. We had to learn algebra by like 3rd grade. Which really messed with me because when I got into public school, math was much easier as soon as I got into public school because it was, a few grades different. Language arts, we had to learn. Obviously, they wanted us to learn to read as soon as possible because the Bible. So we were learning to read like Stuart Little and other things like that, like probably at age 5. I don't know if it was the same deal with you there.
Yeah, we didn't use Abeka math because even my school, I've never been to a Christian school up here that used Abeka math because apparently it's garbage even by the standards of Abeka and other curriculum.
Yeah.
And because there's really no Christian application in math. And so I guess there was no wickedness that was going to seep into our school by way of public school math books.
Yeah, it's way too accelerated, and it doesn't actually cover what you need once you get out of the school system itself. Like, it's enough to get you by for their tests, but as soon as you take public school tests, all of a sudden you're going to find that, wow, this math is easier than the math I've been taking, but why am I failing at it? That's kind of what happened with me, was that I had no problem with math under Abeka with Abeka tests, but as soon as I got into the public education system, all of a sudden I started sucking at math. It was really weird.
Well, yeah, and I can't speak for Abeka math, but for those who are listening to this who might not have been exposed to it, It's a very weird curriculum because it's almost entirely memorization based.
Yes, it's all tables.
Yeah, and I had been exposed to it some when I was in school before we went on to Bob Jones, and it was what we used at the school that I worked at as well. And I had worked in the public school prior to teaching at the Christian school. Well, I was the principal, but then they had me teaching on the side, which you always end up getting overloaded with duties when you're at a Christian school. But I was blown away by how much it was simply reading portions of a textbook. There's the highlighted and italicized terms, and then the whole back of every chapter is just loads of terms that the kids are supposed to memorize, and the tests are all purely recall. And
that's exactly how the language stuff was too. It was all just, hey, what's the definition of this term? Please write it down verbatim, not what you think the word means.
Yeah. There was I had to, it was extremely difficult for me because they told me when I take the job, okay, you're going to run the school and then teach a class or two. And it turned into all the core classes, including biology and history and all these things that I'd never taught in my life. Math I could keep up with and stay a couple days ahead of the kids in. That was easy enough. But content classes, especially these ones where it's pure memorization, I had to find my own way to teach them, teach it on a conceptual level where it was just simply, it's loads of terms. It's very good at I think it can impress parents with the feeling that their kids are learning a lot when all it is heaps of knowledge that aren't going to make them better at anything in the end. It's
just regurgitation, which doesn't, regurgitation does not in and of itself help you with anything except maybe working in a factory. And I think that's when a lot of those curriculums were designed anyway, too, was during the industrial period. And then we just kind of polished them up after that, not actually overhauling them. So that's very much what they were designed for. And I don't think they've really moved past that since. I haven't seen what newer Abeka books look like. I have a contact of mine who also dealt with them, who might be able to get me a couple copies of some of their newer material, because I want to go through it and see what's changed, if anything, if it's changed at all.
Yeah, I could say I've had exposure to the newer ones, but I was probably teaching at the same time you would have been in high school, so...
Yeah, and I was well into the public school system by that point.
Yeah.
So that was not much of an issue with me anymore. I know that science was one of the ones that got really weird because our textbooks mentioned God a lot. In the actual science books, they didn't have any separation whatsoever. In history, it was kind of the same, except it was more like George Washington was a God-fearing man, and then it would continue with the actual history after that point. But it would first establish that this man was a Christian, even though he wasn't.
And I remember them beyond that carrying on a lot about how God influenced these people's lives. And I don't know, it had a lot of really weird, bizarre stuff. If you hadn't gone to a Christian school, it's hard to really convey the kind of stuff they put in there. I remember they talked about how one of my sons was in a Christian school, and he was being taught that hippies were all devil worshippers and their music was devil music and they were all possessed by the devil and all this stuff.
We were taught that about pagans in general.
Yeah, everything where there was an angle to take, they took it and made it about God and about basically isolating their kids from everybody else. In a science class, I remember this when I was a student, they taught us about nerve jamming, which was if you listen to rock and roll music with a beat, it's going to jam up your nerves and leave you susceptible to bad judgment and the devil's influence and stuff. So there's all kinds of bizarre things in there.
See, we didn't learn about that. They, at least at my school, they didn't seem to care very much about what music you did or didn't listen to, which is really strange because what I've gotten from other Christian schools is that they very much care about it. I know that I didn't care for rock music that much when I was a kid, but my dad, who was not a huge part of my life when I was growing up, he loved rock music, and since I didn't have a taste for it yet, he almost every single time attributed it to my school. He was like, well, I know that your religion doesn't really like it that much. And I was just like, what are you talking about? They haven't told me not to listen to rock music. It just doesn't. I guess for me, it's just because rock wasn't as popular when I was growing up, so they didn't deem it as much of a threat.
You could listen to secular rock music?
See, it's not one of the things that were talked about. So my guess, since people didn't really talk about music that much, they talked more about TV shows. they heavily tried to influence what TV shows we listened to. Like we would have letters in the mail sent to our parents about what to and not to let us watch. The one we got in first grade was specifically about Pokemon. They said if you let your children watch Pokemon, they will go to hell. And then obviously when Harry Potter got popular, we got letters in the mail about that. But it seemed mostly visual medium that they were focusing on when I was growing up.
Yeah, we simply couldn't listen to anything that was not Christian. It didn't matter what the music was. Even if it was like old style music or something was just totally benign. If it wasn't about Jesus.
Wasn't the Satanic Panic really like in at that time though?
Yeah. By the time I was in high school, we were kind of at the tail end of the Satanic Panic, and it was really thriving when I was in elementary school. So we heard about how Dungeons and Dragons was of the devil, and everybody was, it was.
Yeah. That's what I get in conversation too, is when I think I was talking with Jim and Steve just about 2 days ago on the Atheist Edge channel, and he mentioned that, you know, when he was growing up, it was Dungeons and Dragons they were protecting you from, but for me it was Pokemon they were protecting you from. And I guess it's just whatever was surging up at the time is the battle they decided they want to fight, because I didn't even hear about Dungeons and Dragons in school at all. That was not something that they even cared about at that point. I think they had already lost that battle.
Yeah, they passed around that chick track and told us that you would become a literal witch or wizard if you played Dungeons and Dragons long enough. Oh my gosh.
Have you seen the movie based on that tract?
Yeah.
It is wonderful in its stupidity.
Well, you know it's stupid on purpose, right?
I know.
Oh,
The movie is meant to parody the tract, but it does the movie is very much a good Poe. Yeah. It's so good at satirizing the tract, it seems serious.
Yeah, I was watching it on Bible Reloaded, and I didn't know it was fake until we got to a certain point. And I mean, it was pretty obvious, but you know, you don't know. I guess that's the nature of Poe's Law.
I do think that's a movie that's just wonderful to watch with friends, because you know the stupid that you're getting into when you watch it. Speaking of stuff that you watch, so they controlled the media that you listen to. Did they, when you were a principal, did they ever suggest any media for you to like show to the kids? Because I know for us, it was a lot of Adventures in Odyssey that they wanted us to show to kids, or wanted us to see. I was the kid in that situation.
Not much. They gave me some Kent Hovind videos to show the kids. And really, even though I was a Christian at that time, I had struggled for a long time to make myself think I believed. I mean, even years before then. And so I was of a bit more of a liberal mindset than I think they wanted me to be when I was working at the school.
Yeah.
And so I would talk my way carefully through what was said in some of their curriculum. And I would show the videos because we had to, and I was overworked and it was videos, so it helped. But yeah, we would always talk pretty skeptically about it. And most of the kids, their parents had badmouthed Kent Hovind. You know, he was an idiot. They disagree with stuff. Of course, Ken Ham was awesome, but you know, they had distinguished.
Even though they had roughly the same message.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess it's just in how they portray themselves. Ken Ham doesn't seem quite so crazy. He seems moderate until you listen to him enough to know that he's very not.
Yeah.
Whereas Kent Hovind is definitely not moderate, and he makes no bones about it.
Yeah, Ham at least has a soothing way of talking that can catch you off guard, I think, at first, where Hovind just seems like a twitchy, crazy person from the moment you start watching him.
See, you use the word "seems like," and I can't help but wonder if that's you trying to give him more credit than is due. Because for me, it's not seems like. For me, it's he is.
Oh, yeah, I think he is. I'm just saying it's transparent with him where it's not as much with Ham, maybe.
He's sleeping in it. So speaking of things that seem soothing, our cat has now decided that I guess he's high off his rocker. He is now sleeping in the litter box of the new cat litter. He thinks that is comfortable. I really think that those drugs need to get out of his system. Like, Pam, do you want to turn the camera to him?
I didn't even notice it.
Yeah, no, he has decided that, like, Pam is gonna go ahead and segue real quick. He has kicked a bunch of clay out, and he's decided that it is time to lay down in it. I'm very confused. But yeah, on to other confusing things. Schools. So I know for us, a lot of the media they wanted to listen to, I didn't hear about Kent Hovind or Ken Ham or anyone in school, though they did mention, I guess, the Scottish doctor who had mapped out the 6,000 years thing, the 6,400 years for the first time. They mentioned him and said that, oh yeah, this proves that the Earth is 6,000 years old, and that's what we were taught. But we didn't actually hear like any of the big names that you hear nowadays pertaining to them. For media-wise, though, there were these cartoons, and I don't really remember what they were named. I remember Adventures in Odyssey because I actually liked that. Still to this day, I'll watch some Adventures in Odyssey. It's not a bad show, even if it is propaganda. But there was another set of shows they would watch where like they would have cartoon versions of Bible stories. So like you'd see the entire ordeal with Nebuchadnezzar with the writing on the wall, and obviously they were very, very whitewashed. If David went into the lions, you wouldn't see any skeletons in the pit where other people had died.
Yeah, on a side note, I thought it'd be fun to do videos sometime where it's basically Adventures in Odyssey, but they always take the kids back and show them something horrifying from the Bible.
Oh my gosh! Are you wanting to do that animated, or are you wanting to do that like cinematography, real life?
No, it would have to be animated. I can't do cinematography.
Okay, because I was going. Well, technically we could if we had enough of us together in a room and we had brilliant doubt there. I'm sure we'd be able to film it.
Oh, I'm
well.
not a good enough camera person for you.
We don't own a camera good enough for it. He does.
Nope.
Yeah, the challenges though would be like backgrounds and costumes and stuff like that. If we were to take it back to Bible times,
wardrobe is huge.
Why?
I mean, realistically, I don't think that would be much of an issue because think about it. You could just drape towels over yourself and go, "Yep, we in Rome."
Toga party.
That's true.
I love a good toga party.
But anyway, we can stick a pin in that, and I'll let you continue with your thought when I interrupted you.
Take everything and call yourself Zeus.
What? Wrong religion. So yeah, I know for media, that's about where we sat. Obviously for the different subjects like we were on before, I know that the one that always stuck out to me, and I've mentioned it in a video before, is we actually had in one of our ABEGA textbooks, Darwin said that evolution was a lie and had a bedside conversion, and that was actually like in our textbooks.
Oh yeah, all that stuff was.
Of course it was. I'm like looking back on it, I can understand how me as a kid went, yeah, that makes sense. Evolution means we came from monkeys, and that doesn't make sense. As an adult, I'm like, I didn't even know what the fuck a chromosome 2 was.
Yeah. And that's the problem. That's part of what I try to remember when you run into these creationists who won't even listen to any sense as far as arguments go, but they won't even hear you explain what your position is or what evolution it actually is. And I have to remember what it was like for me in my education. These people have been exposed to this and had this drilled over and over in their heads. And so you're telling them something really different when you say, well, we don't actually believe we came from monkeys or that the universe came from a literal explosion or whatever.
Yeah, but even the theory of universal expansion doesn't say literal explosion. The Big Bang is it's the pejorative that's been adopted as the term.
Right, exactly. And so you can't get them to hear that though. It's always it was an explosion, what exploded, those kinds of dumb things.
Yeah, and it's like granted, I do like the term Big Bang Theory now because I've been so used to it. But I do wish that as a society, what are you doing? Got like 5 minutes. What are you doing, Pam? I do wish that for stuff like that, we would actually refer to it as, the theory of universal expansion, simply because that conveys much better what we actually postulate happened. But yeah, it's a bit late now. Society's got, just like the whole evolution from monkeys thing, society's already grabbed hold of it, unfortunately, and grabbed it in the wrong direction. I don't know if there's a lot that can be done about that.
Well, I don't even know if there's anything that can have been done in hindsight. I think you're going to have to use some kind of colloquialism to sum up science for the public, and it's always going to be misconstrued, especially when you have people invested in misconstruing it.
There is that. I can't get my camera to work either. That's what that is, actually, I think.
Oh, that's your broken camera thing?
Yeah, it's going.
That's the thing telling you that your camera is the busted.
or not working or not plugged in or something.
I mean, you could just hit the turn camera off button and it will turn you back to your avatar.
But I like being a broken camera.
I mean,
that's my
I
mood
didn't
right now.
be on camera.
Aren't we all just broken people?
Well, I don't know. Is a camera like a person?
I apologize for causing an existential crisis.
I've survived them all, so.
So when you were being a principal, it was just over a few rooms essentially. It wasn't over like, I guess what you would consider an official school. As far as the because you said that when you were a principal there, was it when you were a principal that it was over like a few rooms in a church, or when you were in Christian school it was a few rooms in a church?
That's what they all are up here. That's my whole concept of a Christian school, is that they set aside part of the church to use its classrooms during the week.
Gotcha. Okay, so yeah, your concept of Christian school is completely opposite of mine, because when I think Christian private school, I think ridiculously well-funded, isolated compound.
No, nothing like that. It was always, a lot of the times these churches would have rooms they had built specifically with the school in mind. But it wasn't a separate thing set aside from churches in this big fancy building or anything. They tended to be small institutions that had trouble funding themselves and were usually a bit of a drain on the church.
Yeah, and that's not quite what ours was. I know with PCA there were two churches. We had St. John's Chapel on campus, and it was an actual full-size church. But to give you, I mean, you've seen some of the pictures of the school from my video. But to give an example, St. John's Chapel was a full-size church, and it was probably it was the equivalent of a tool shed set to the side on the Pensacola Christian campus grounds. But it was a full-size church.
Yeah.
And we had that just set aside somewhere in there. And me as a kid, I always liked when we went to St. John's Chapel because it was more fun than learning it in the classroom, I guess, just because it was different. It's really weird when the school can make church seem fun, simply because it's less boring than learning it in the school itself. But the other church that PCA had is on their college campus. So they have their school campus, which is K through 12. And then the church that's on that campus and that huge complex. Then they have another complex that's even larger, which is their college campus. And it's literally, there's a bridge between the two. Like there's a moat in between them, and that's it. Wow. So it's like a mile stretch of just Pensacola Christian bullshit. And
yours is probably a little bit of an aberration anyway, because you guys are like the headquarters of Christian schooling in the country, aren't you?
I don't know if it's headquarters of Christian schooling in the country, but I think they actually have a big stake in ABECA, so close to it.
Yeah, you guys are the people who produce the textbooks and everything. So it seems like in some way you guys are at the center of the whole. And you guys are probably funded by all the textbooks, right? To some extent.
I think so, because I told you about the issue with like when 9/11 happened, how quickly they changed our textbooks out into ones that had the Twin Towers on there, like always remember, please pray for. And it was like within a week of 9/11, and like there's no way a school would have the funding to just swap the books out that quickly. That's just that's ridiculous. But yeah, they were incredibly well funded, so I think they might be at least having a high stake in ABECA, if not the sole proprietors there. I know that one of my friends growing up actually started working for ABECA. Johnny, why am I hearing myself through you?
I'm here.
I don't want to hear myself. I hate my voice.
I just wanted to be on camera too.
You wanted to be on camera too?
There you go.
Wanted to be special?
Oh yeah, might as well. I took a shower.
I would have at least trimmed my wild beard if I knew I was going to be on camera.
I just shaved my beard off. I feel so lonely now. So the other
behind my windscreen.
The other weird
thing. I got a question for you guys too. Was your
I can barely hear you, Johnny.
You can barely hear me?
I can hear you. You're just very low. Though the reason that I brought up that's better. The reason that I brought up the other campus that they had though is that so we had the St. John's Chapel, which was your standard like church on the corner size church, and then we had at Pensacola Christian College they had the mega church, like the Bill Olstein style church. They owned both of those.
Yeah.
So there were some people who didn't even go to the schools, but just went to the church on the college campus. So, there goes all their money. Like, they had the money for all of that, plus college campus, plus school campus, plus, a Becca. Like, just ridiculous.
Wow. Well, I have just a few more minutes before I have to go to.
I did have a question for you guys. Can you hear me good?
Yeah, go ahead.
When it came to your school, was it like, were you happy to get home then with how strict the school was compared to being at home, or did that carry over?
I think that's every school in the world.
Yeah, I suppose, but
yeah, I didn't have my feeling was, I think, the same as any kid with school. Like, I always look forward to it on the first day because you're going to see all your friends and stuff. And then I mostly just wanted to go home because it was boring. There was nothing. Yeah. My home life was roughly as intense as school was, as far as the rules and everything goes. So I didn't notice anything really onerous. I think just because that's all I knew, I just was bored.
Yeah, if it's all you know, you're not going to know any different, right?
Yeah.
So with that, I'd ask Zod, what were you going to say since you've only got a few minutes left?
Oh, I was just going to say, let's hear Johnny's question real quick so you can get that in. Yeah.
So
we covered it.
he covered it right before you could ask. Johnny, are you a prophet? Do I need to do a prophecy report video on you?
Well, I wouldn't call it prophecy, but I'm wrong most of the time.
So you are a prophet then?
Exactly.
That sounds not unlike every prophet I've heard.
Or a meteorologist.
That is the one job that you can fuck up every day and still keep.
Still keep your job.
You just need to say stuff. You just need to say stuff that's vague without a time frame, and then you can be a prophet.
Yeah, pretty much.
To tease out my conversation for tomorrow, this is part of my Christian experience as well. A huge part of Pentecostalism is prophecy. And so we'd always be hearing prophecies at church and school and stuff like that. But it was always really vague stuff about how God loves us and he has a will for our lives and that we're going to see good things in the future.
I don't know him, so.
Well, I know that Zod has another stream that he's doing tomorrow with the Godless Iowan, that anybody who wants to hear all of that, which is essentially going to be a second part of this, because that's going to get into more facets of his faith. Definitely go and watch that whenever that comes out tomorrow.
Yeah, I wish I'd had time to go into more miscellaneous parts of religion and stuff today, other than school. But I'm pressed for time because of a couple things that came up. But
that's fair. Well, I'm sure that at some point we can schedule another hangout to sort of flesh out on other topics as well. It's not exactly
This could be the school one, and then we could have an extra school one.
You mean extracurricular?
Sure, we'll call it what we want to call it.
Bad joke. Sorry, I had to make the joke. I'm a terrible person with terrible humor.
I can probably squeeze in a minute or two. We got a question. What was the accreditation of the schools/college? To cover mine real quick, at the school I went to growing up, basically none. Oh, okay. The school itself was accredited through something called ACSI, Association of Christian Schools International, I think is what it was. So
yep.
And I don't know if that was the same with yours as well. But the teachers didn't have to be accredited at all. They were basically parents or people from the church or whoever.
What did you say yours was accredited by?
ACSI.
Mine was accredited by TRACS, Transnational Association of Christian Colleges and Schools.
Okay.
So very circular. The Christian school was accredited by the Christian school.
Yeah, roughly. Yeah.
Yeah,
it was all internal. I don't know what ACSI's credentials are for, or what standards they held schools to academically. I don't think it was much.
Did they believe in God? Yes, they pass.
Yeah. But that gets into a whole other can of worms where the laws for having a Christian school or homeschooling are so lenient just because there's so many people who would be up in arms if they couldn't educate their kids how they wanted to in their own way.
Yeah.
And I have a really big issue with that. It turns out I've caught up with a lot of people who I went to Christian school with just in the last few months. And I had it really good because I actually had a very good home life. My parents were strict in a Christian household kind of way. Mm-hmm. But they were actually very, very loving. All the kids wish they had my parents, I guess, at that school, which I just learned recently. But there were kids who just had like insanely abusive, I don't know, home lives and school lives growing up. And the amount of stuff that goes on beneath the surface, just because people aren't accredited, nobody's trained to look out for kids in a social welfare type way, and there was sexual abuse that was going on beneath the surface, and people were covering it up. The typical things that always happen at Christian schools or in religious environments, and just nobody's trained to deal with anything.
I didn't necessarily see a lot of that, because once I left the school, it seemed that not only did I distance myself from those kids, but a lot of those kids distanced themselves from me. Or alternatively, their parents would make sure they were distanced from me because I was no longer in the Christian school.
Yeah.
That happened often.
Yeah, the school I worked at, I was a little bit different because I was actually a certified teacher. I'd gone there from the public schools, but most of those teachers there had a degree. But at the school I had attended as a child, they actually prided themselves in just being people with a calling from the Lord, not having education. They would think it was actually a good thing if their pastors hadn't gone to seminary and were just called by the Lord. So they had a very strong anti-intellectual, anti-education stance.
Education sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it worked out as well as you think. There were kids a few years older than me who their whole first grade was set back a year. They were all back a year because back in first grade they all had to do first grade again because their teacher was so bad that they didn't learn anything. And
I think that's why Becca set their system up to be mostly regurgitation, so that somebody who wasn't trained could technically use it.
Yeah, that's a lot of what it is. It's hard to teach kids that much regurgitation, but yeah, it is very much built for untrained teachers or homeschoolers to pick up and start working with. The problem is the sheer volume of it, though. One thing I had to apply my background in teaching to was simply making some of the information relevant and weeding out what they didn't need to know. I edited the test very heavily. There's no way most kids could pass most of the tests that they came up with in terms of sheer volume of information you had to regurgitate.
Yeah,
it was pretty insane.
But with that said, as much as I don't want to cut it short, I know that you're sitting about 3 minutes over your time.
Yeah, I got to get going. I got to run and pick my kid up from school and deal with a couple things. So I got to cut off now, but I will catch you guys later, and maybe we can pick up on a little bit more of this at a different time. So
definitely.
Sounds good. Thanks
for having me on.
Zod.
Yep, bye.
And that means it's just me and Johnny. How are you, Johnny?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I would be doing much better if I could hear you.
All right. Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I'll just have to
Your microphone seems to be really, really touchy. Like if you're a foot away from it, it can't hear it.
I'm on the iPad, and I got the other mic in the other room. Actually, I'm going to go to the other room. I'll turn the camera off here. I just wanted to show my mug for a change. I'll turn the camera off. I'll go to the other camera or the other mic.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Suddenly, I can no longer see Johnny. I don't know if this is a good or bad thing, but you can still see me, so it's a negative.
Can you hear me a little better now?
Holy crap, I can hear you.
Yeah, well, it's a little bit more nuance here too, I suppose. No, I'm doing good, and you?
I am here, as I was before, but we'll say that probably in about 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to be hopping off here as well.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, I'm sorry I fell behind today. I got so much stuff to do outside or whatever, but
it's fine. Same with us. We had just come in, just changed out all the litter boxes, and I had just gotten a shower in 5 minutes before the original scheduled time for starting the stream. So I was running it like this close to the wire myself.
It was like the first time in like 8 months I sweated because of the weather, and it's like, man, I feel dirty. I had to do it.
Hey, it seems that they has decided to hop in now.
Hey.
It's unfortunate that he missed the actual thing, but then again, we're going to end up doing another one of these with Zod eventually. That way we can kind of expound on what we've been.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's right. I plan to stream tomorrow, I think at noon Central Time with Purple Dan. That should be interesting.
Oh, nice. I definitely will need. I'll be at work. Well, I can just fish my earphone into my ear. I picked up a Bluetooth earphone so I can hide it like right under my hair here because it's black too.
I don't have here to hide that stuff.
Yeah, I just hide that in so I can listen to stuff when I'm at work. It helps because like I have anxiety, So when I've got something playing like an audiobook or somebody's stream or something, it just kind of calms all that down. So it's definitely useful for that. And I definitely am going to make sure I can do everything in my power to keep doing that. So if
a lot of stuff I've done, I'm kind of like the straw boss foreman usually on a lot of the jobs that I've done. It bugs me when the people are cranking the tunes or whatever. I get it and I let it happen, but you can't even talk to someone. You tell them something and then they screw something up because you told them because they couldn't hear you.
See, for me, luckily, my job is I have to do the same motion with my hand over and over and over again, and I don't have to talk to the actual customers all that much unless there's like an actual problem. So for me, I can actually listen to music and it doesn't affect my performance at all.
Yeah. All I can do is just when you're trying to talk to somebody else, when you're trying, getting your barking your orders out, it's like if they can't hear you or they think they hear you differently, then it's like, oh well.
Yeah. My biggest issue is that if somebody's trying to talk to me, but they're talking kind of like this, and they're expecting that I can hear them.
I hate the whisperers.
Yeah, they're always very, very fun to listen to, and by fun, I mean definitely not at all.
And there is the opposite of that too. The guys that yell right in your face or whatever, just can't slow down or whatever.
The worst thing is when you've got the person who starts talking like this, and then when you ask them to speak up, okay, fine, is this better? Yeah, those types of people, they bother me greatly because I'm like, there was an area in between those where you could have been a normal fucking human being.
Yep.
Just between those two extremes. But I'm glad that you decided that you wanted to act like that.
Oh yeah.
But
what is the temperature down there? You're in Georgia, right, or somewhere on there?
Yes, I am.
What is your temperature right now?
Right now we are sitting. I have no idea. My phone is actually sitting in a bag of rice right now.
I don't know if you noticed, but what was it? 4 days ago, we had like 3 feet of snow on the ground, and now there's nothing on the ground. It melted in 2 days flat, and the river, it didn't quite get to its record level, but it crested pretty high.
See, the worst part about whenever it's wintertime, at least here in Georgia, is if we get snow or we get like actually good winter weather, I have to be prepared to listen to all of the idiots going, well, I guess that global warming was a lie.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, you and I need to have a talk about CFDs.
I'm doing that. I don't even know if I'm capable of doing all the research on it, but I'm doing research on this one guy. He's a meteorologist, and he put a thing out on Minnesota and wind power and stuff. And he's got other stuff on his channel that are trying to do climate change stuff. And it's like, wow, man, you're just all he's doing is skewing the numbers or whatever, and cherry picking the data. And it's like, climate science is pretty tough.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. I know that I've had one friend who was like, can you give me one instance where we've actually damaged the ozone layer? And I'm like, yeah, with CFDs from aerosol cans and our own window units. Like,
we got lead. We pretty much took lead out of our ground. So,
well, we stopped once we stopped using them. We actually saw that the ozone layer over the North Pole started to actually heal itself back up.
It was almost immediate too.
Yes,
lead too. We used to have lead and gas and everything.
We used to have lead in everything, in almost everything.
Yeah.
And whenever, yeah, when I had that conversation with that particular friend of mine, I was just like, so why did these two things happen? Why was it that when these things got stopped, all of a sudden that started to patch itself up? He's like, well, there's no proof that was the reason. Like, at least you're right. At least you do understand the concept of correlation does not mean causation. At least you get that, but it doesn't make you right.
That's true. Hey, I saw that video that you did with the atheist count. That's Gallus Geezer, right? That started that now?
What was that? Try one more time.
Gallus Geezer started that atheist comedy central or whatever.
Yes.
Cool, man.
Shoot, I forgot. I told him I was actually going to try to plug that, and we didn't have a lot of time, so I completely forgot.
I'll plug it right here.
Anybody who is watching right now, there's I don't know if you've ever seen Godless Geezer, but he started a new channel, and it's called the Atheist Comedy Center. Definitely go check it out. If you can't find it, my last video on my channel actually has a link to it in the description, because I know that he hasn't gotten the SEO for it down yet, so it might be hard to find. But he's got a parody of the atheist experience on there, where instead of calling, Matt Dillahunty and getting somebody who's actually decently educated on a subject talk to theists, he has atheists call in, and it's Pastor Dunning-Kruger.
I'll leave a link in the description of this hideout too.
Awesome. But yeah, it's I laughed listening to it after the fact, and I was one of the ones who helped record it, so I already knew the things he was going to say.
He's funny. He's funny as hell.
he really is, and I'm hoping that this channel of his actually pushes a lot more forward than his Godless Geezer one did. I know for the Geezer one, he got himself mucked up in the algorithm.
Is that what happened?
From what me and him talked about, he said that he tried to diversify into too many other topics.
Okay.
And when he did, he had subscribers who would come in who wanted the comedy, and they would find the serious stuff, and then he'd have subscribers come in who wanted the serious stuff and find the comedy, and then just he couldn't get subscribers past the 1,600 mark. It just died after that.
Yeah, I just let everybody know
so he's wanting to focus this one on mostly the comedy. And push forward with that, and I 100% am behind him on that. Yeah, and I want to see his channel.
I think that's true. The one thing that I have heard though is that you should, and I've got like 2 DIY videos on my channel of painting a checkerboard floor, and they always I'm getting. In fact, they're increasing each month. They get more and more hits every month, and they keep on. And it's been that way I've had them for 2 years, and they're my most popular videos. And I've heard YouTube even say something about that you should do, no matter what your brand is, do some sort of a DIY video, and that'll really, it gets your random hits on your channel a lot more, I guess, is what the deal is with that.
Yeah, I guess the thing is though is that if you get those hits and you get those views, that's fine, but you have to have views turn into subscribers, and then you have to have subscribers trickle back down into views, and that's the real trick. Because you can get like 100,000 people to watch one video on your channel, but if only 0.00001% of them actually subscribe, then it didn't actually have the net positive effect.
Yeah, I get that, but if you're, let's see, those are the only ones that made any money on me on any of my videos.
You're just like, Cyrus, you're probably right, but I need that ad revenue.
Yeah, the ad revenue looked a lot more better than whatever you're talking about, the net positive.
Yeah. And I guess that's also the difference in mindset, though, because for me, I want to actually take my channel and try to push it towards.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to do too. I get that, but I've heard them say that that's a good way to get more people to hit your channel. From if you want more random views, that's one of the best ways to do it. You're gonna get more.
Just have something that random people want to watch instead of just your niche.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I necessarily agree with the methodology behind that, but for that, I think I'm too much of a layman still to really give a solid there. I can regurgitate what I've been told, but we've been told different things, and neither of us are experts.
And YouTube kind of keeps that algorithm secret a little bit. So
as best they can, yes, they do everything in their power to do that.
Yeah, well,
so they just asked if you should do a do-it-yourself conspiracy theory, and I think he should.
I want to come up. I want to let's pick a topic and let's see if we can come up with a good conspiracy theory one time. We should do that. I think we should do that.
I definitely think so too. You just like go out into the outside world, pick 5 random things, and connect the dots together on them, and then see if you can come up with some like.
Show how it's done. Let's show them how to do a really good one, huh?
Just make a grandiose one out of that point. Actually, that's something we should do on a drive-by later. Just me, you, and they hammer out a conspiracy theory just off the fly. Like, don't even think about it beforehand. Just like go into Wikipedia, look at 5 random topics, connect them together, and then create a grand conspiracy from it.
I would be down with that. That
really does sound like I don't drink, but it sounds like a drinking hangout topic, and I would still do it.
Yeah, it would be. Oh, that's right. I got bourbon here.
It is kind of what Flat Earth is. It's taking a bunch of tangential, really unrelated evidence, quote unquote, and kind of slamming it together. The difference between Flat Earth and a true conspiracy theory or a good conspiracy theory is that with Flat Earth, all of the evidence, quote unquote, comes from a bad foundation. Mm-hmm. Whereas with a good conspiracy theory, like say take like the loose change theory for 9/11, take something like that. Mm-hmm. That conspiracy works because to a layman, every single thing mentioned in that conspiracy makes sense. It sounds correct.
Yeah, there's
down to the whole jet fuel can't melt steel beam shenanigans. It all sounds plausible.
It has the semantics in there too, you know, with using the colloquial and other kind of terms mixed together. So
yes, whereas with flat Earth, most of the things that flat earthers say are observable are not in fact observable, and that's the difference between those two.
That's all I gotta say to them.
What's up?
Go to the North Pole, and they got to just go to the North Pole, sit and spin, and then they'll figure it out after about 4 or 5 days. Well, we are spinning in a circle.
Or they could just go down to the North Pole or down to the South Pole.
No, that's got a block of wall. That's got a wall down there. Remember, you can't get to the South Pole.
And it's like for instance, I think for a lot of those conspiracies, the best thing to do is take even the conspiracy with a grain of salt. Like, obviously, the official report on anything.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take the official report, because there's an agenda behind it almost 999% of the time. Almost all the time, there's going to be an agenda behind an official report.
Yeah.
But like something like, for instance, did we land on the moon? We have evidence that we did.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention, there's actually, if there were any agenda, the agenda would have been for like Russia to say, no, you guys didn't land on the moon. We still are in the space race, and that didn't happen.
Hollow Earth. Illuminati.
The Earth is hollow and the moon is a flat disc.
Made out
apparently.
made out of government cheese.
And I would say, as far as multiple engineers, there's multiple engineers that say that the Earth is flat. Just having a bunch of engineers say it doesn't necessarily automatically point it out. And granted, as far as the 9/11 conspiracy is concerned, I still, to this day, I still hold reservations, because I don't necessarily. I know that we have things like the sinking of the Lusitania that was 100% us. So if information came out like tomorrow that 100% said that it was us, then I'd say, okay, that makes sense. But if information came out tomorrow that said 100% it wasn't us, to me, that would also make sense.
So me and my theist friend got in a little discussion. I couldn't remember exactly. I tried looking up, but he was trying to say that the Bible says that the Earth is spherical, and I said no, it doesn't.
The Bible says that
circle,
the Earth
and it also says
disc.
4 pillars.
Yeah, the Bible says the Earth is a disc, either suspended on 4 pillars, or on other passages it is suspended. It is suspended and held by God. But in both scenarios, it very much calls the Earth a disc.
Yeah.
Never an actual oblate spheroid.
And the measure, if you can measure it, it has an end to it, and you fall off the end, right? Yeah,
if it did.
Yeah. Yeah, he comes up with all kinds of just whatever comes to his head first, or whatever, to make the belief stay true.
Yeah, and that's one of the weird things about flat earthers is that I have yet to meet a flat earther who was not a theist.
Yeah, I don't think I have either.
I don't know. I know because a lot of the information for flat Earth comes from the Bible, but it seems that like they start with, it's a lot like your classical apologetics. They start with the Bible, and they say, okay, well, the Bible is right. Now let me justify my belief after the fact. Because, like, for instance, with your classical apologetics, have you ever met a theist that turned into a theist because of the ontological argument? Or did you meet a theist who was indoctrinated normally and then accepted the ontological argument after the fact?
Yeah, and I would say that would be the case. Most people that I've met, probably, I don't know too many people that weren't indoctrinated and then all of a sudden became a theist. I don't know many of them.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with me with like flat Earth, is they didn't start thinking the Earth was flat and then looked at evidence and it all made sense. For them, for the most part, it's they accepted the Earth is flat because of the Bible, and then everything else after the fact convinced them further.
Yeah, it's just weird. The flat Earth is weird. It's just so easy to. I don't know. I can look out my window right now and go, yeah, it's not flat.
No, and I do have to say that with So what Justice is Clear just pointed out, that flat earthers are in a cult life belief to defend it. Actually, on a stream with me and Steve McRae and a few others a few weeks ago, we went through the cult mentality checklist. And flat earthers, we expanded it out to young earth creationists, but flat earthers obviously fall under that very easily. We went through the checklist and actually found that they hit they hit every single thing in the checklist for cult-like mentality.
I wouldn't doubt that one bit, because they get pretty. I mean, they're like totally adamant about defending it too. I mean, they get all riled up if you challenge their belief. Yeah. They
It's
all kinds of things too.
Yeah, it's the only difference. I know that Telltale Atheist is a better judge of cults than I am. But I was talking with Telltale the other on Holy Kool-Aid's channel the other day, and when I brought up the conversation with Steve McRae, because Telltale doesn't believe that Flat Earth is a cult, simply because he's got a huge whatchamacallit. He has a very strict definition for cult, and actually they just got it right on the head. Is that the only thing that they did not hit was having a leader, a defined leader.
That's true.
and that's the only difference between Flat Earth and a classical cult to someone like Telltale, and me as well, if I'm going by all of his definitions strictly, is if Flat Earthers had a definitive leader, one leader, or even a group of leaders, then at that point they would definitely register as a cult to me.
Yeah,
Till then, they are cult-like. They have cult-like mentality, cult-like beliefs, but they are not a true cult until they have a true leader.
They haven't found their fearless leader yet.
Yes. Whereas, like, take young Earth creationists. Are they a cult? No. But are young Earth creationists under Kent Hovind a cult?
Yes.
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 Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Once you put the hierarchy structure in there and have the authority.
Jeranism is hardly a leader. Jeranism is a figurehead in the Flat Earth Society. He's a figurehead, but he is not the figurehead. He is not the bona fide leader. Same distinction I would make with young Earth creationists. Mm-hmm. All young Earth creationists do not believe in Ken Ham. All young Earth creationists do not believe in Kent Hovind. Some do, and the ones that do, I would qualify that in-group as a cult. But the out-group as a whole, no.
No. Because I've commented with some commenters where you can tell that they don't even they don't even pay attention to what Ken Ham says. They're just on there. Well, they do AIG things or whatever. They copy paste that shit.
Like, for instance, I have a young Earth creationist who works at work with me, and he doesn't like Ken Ham. He strictly doesn't follow Ken Ham. So, there's a example right there of a Yek who doesn't believe in Ken Ham.
I guess that Aussie accent doesn't work for everybody, huh?
The smooth Australian accent just doesn't get him going. Love how as soon as we started talking about young Earth creationism, we started getting more people watching randomly.
Yeah, that's the way it goes.
Yeah, it's a shame that we ended up losing Zod, but he had to do stuff, and obviously I was supposed to be out of here like 20 minutes earlier, but Pam's in the middle of an episode still, so I still have time I can buy.
Well, what if I want to do something? I'll hang out for a while. I'm enjoying this. I haven't looked at the chat. Is anybody asking questions? Who's got questions in the chat?
They asked what if their leader is ignorance, and they're definitely led by ignorance, but I don't think that they swear fealty to ignorance.
All hail ignorance.
All hail stupidity. Oh wait, those are different, but in this case, not quite.
Could somebody help me tie my shoes? Never mind, I got Velcro.
Max Powerland, Flat Earth Society. Again, with stuff like that, I'd have to say that it really just depends on if you're willing to take all of them, even though some of them are in an out group from the in group that follows people like Jeranism or Max. Again, it's the same idea with like, say there's Christians. Is Christianity a cult? Well, no, not by itself. But are Jehovah's Witnesses a cult, an in group within Christianity? Absolutely. They have defined leaders. They have the Watchtower Society. They have their own propaganda. They are 100% a cult. But Christianity as the out-group is not.
Well, that's kind of the thing about the Bible. It has spurred all these cults or whatever throughout the centuries. It got Catholic. That was That's a cult in a sense. At least about.
Well, and you have like the Heaven's Gate.
Oh yeah.
And stuff like that.
Yep.
Now, I would say Chris and Snuffy Weffica said I would say Christianity is a cult. I would have to say that Christianity is a religion. Whether or not I think it's worth a damn is a completely different thing. But Christianity itself is not a cult because Christianity itself does not hit every checkbox of a cult. But individual sects within Christianity do. Mormonism, 100% a cult. Jehovah's Witnesses, 100% a cult.
Adventist.
But a Seventh-day Adventist, 100% a cult. But an evangelical? Probably not.
Yeah.
Catholic? Probably yes. All religions do follow the broadest definitions of cult. And so if you want to call them a cult, I'm not going to stop you. I have no issue with calling religion a cult if you're using a super broad definition. But if we were to use, say, Telltale's Logic, who actually studies cults as like his method of income, for him, I agree with some of his mentality that the difference between a true cult and something that is cult-like. So,
yeah, it's got to have all the cogs in the wheel for it to really.
It has to have all the cogs in the wheel, and so with so hold on, I'm going to look up the checklist for a cult. Hold on.
Well, no. If I was going to start a cult, see, I still drink, so I had to make a bourbon drinking cult, and that's all we do. And we'd be pissed off if people took our bourbon from us.
Checklist of cult characteristics. Okay, so
Jim Beam.
Where are you? Okay, so here's a checklist. So the group displays excessively zealous and unquestioning commitment to its leader, whether he is alive or dead, regards his belief system, ideology, and practices as truth and as the law. Christianity definitely hits that check mark.
Oh, yeah.
Easily. Questioning doubt. I know. Well, Zod's gone. It's just me and Johnny right now.
Well, I know that, but like you said 5 minutes, 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, and you're still watching an episode.
I just started this one.
You almost asked me.
I figured you were still watching, so you were fine. Well, I'm gonna get through this checklist then. Okay.
You're in a cult.
What's up?
You're in a cult. No, just kidding.
Cult of Pam. The cult of Pam. So questioning, doubt, and dissent are discouraged or even punished. In some instances. In some instances, that one I would have to say is a little bit wishy.
Not even so much the after, thinking about the afterlife as your punishment, because that's torture in itself to me. For some people anyway.
Mind-altering practices such as meditation, chanting, speaking in tongues, denunciation sessions, and debilitating work routines are used in excess to serve and suppress doubts about the group and its leaders. No, not all Christianity does that.
Nope.
Just telling people to read the book and listen to the pastor is not in and of itself a mind-altering practice, so they do not hit that checklist. There are some that do. 100%. Pentecostalism definitely has the speaking in tongues. Yep. I would say that the debilitating work routines and stuff, Mormonism and Jehovah's Witnesses can definitely hit in that area. So 100%, I would say that there are areas of Christianity that do have that, but not all. Next one, the leadership dictates, sometimes in great detail, how members should think, act, and feel. For example, members must get permission to date, change jobs, marry, etc., whether or not to have children, have discipline their children, and so forth. Not all Christianity is like that. There are very lax forms of Christianity that don't have any of that whatsoever.
Unitarians. My mom and grandma went to that church or wherever. Pretty much they were atheists. So
no, I mean, like you could be at a Methodist church, and they're definitely not going to follow that one for the most part. So again, there's another check mark that all Christianity doesn't hit. The group is elitist, claiming special or exalted status for itself. That one, yes, almost all Christianity hits that. The group has a polarized us versus them mentality, which may cause conflict with the wider society. There's some Christianity that has the us versus them mentality, and there's some that has the we are the in-group and we have to help the out-group mentality, as opposed to us versus it's us helping. That one, it really depends on how you define it. The next one is the leader is not accountable to any authorities, unlike, for example, teachers.
That's a huge thing for me.
What's up?
That's a huge thing for when you have you hold somebody up in such high praise that there's nothing can hurt, nothing they do is bad. That is when you're in trouble.
Now, see, this is the one that I find is interesting. So this one definitely hits the check mark, but there's a caveat I want to throw on there that's actually hilarious. So the leader is not accountable to any authorities. So Jesus would be considered the leader in this regard, and he's not accountable unless you have a specific pastor who you think is not accountable. But let's call it Jesus. So if the leader is not accountable to any authorities, any priests, monks, rabbis, or anyone, so you know, it's something that's funny is that 9 times out of 10, if there's something that Jesus has said, but it is in conflict with something that Paul has said, I've noticed that generally speaking, Christians defer to Paul.
Yeah. I got this friend that thinks Paul's a liar, hypocrite, and all that crap or whatever. That's all he does preach is Paul's a liar.
Yeah, it's very strange. And then, so the next one is the group teaches or implies that its supposedly exalted ends justify whatever means it deems necessary. This may result in members participating in behaviors or activities they wouldn't have considered otherwise, or are reprehensible, or are unethical before joining the group, and they might do them after joining the group. That one, yes, in some cases. I don't think that one necessarily applies to all Christianity. No. But I do think that in many cases it does. I'd be comfortable giving this check mark to all Christianity, even though I think there's some caveats.
I mean, if you just took the Bible at its face value, it would be a cult. It could be promoting cults.
My specific terminology for Christianity is apocalyptic death cult.
Yeah,
it is obsessed with death. It is obsessed with revelation and the apocalypse. And after that, it's an apocalyptic death cult. I will use that term loosely and be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
I guess it's the same difference between atheist and agnostic as far as like the Stanford Dictionary is concerned. Because if we go by the Stanford Dictionary for Philosophy with Steve McRae, for him, I have to call myself an agnostic 100% because I cannot, under the dictionary definition, call myself an atheist. But if I go by the colloquial usage, I can call myself an atheist. And that's fine. Same thing with cults. Colloquially, I would say that Christianity definitely serves as a cult. But if I'm having to go by like the strictest of strict definitions, they don't hit every cog. They just don't. Next one is subservience to a leader or group requires the member to cut ties with family and friends. If you take the Bible at face value, yes, because Jesus did say, if you can't scorn your mother and brothers, then you're not able to be with me. So I would say that one is a yes if we're just going strictly by the Bible. But if we're going by current day Christianity, then no, it doesn't check that box because Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and Catholics do have the shunning and the excommunication, but not all. Like, again, I can just cite Methodist. Yeah. I can just cite Methodist Christians, and they don't fall into that.
You know, when it comes to that definition out of Stanford Encyclopedia, I fit the hard atheist definition. Because
you fit hard
atheism? I prove God doesn't exist.
Hard rejection.
I prove God doesn't exist every day.
Says the group is preoccupied with bringing in new members. I think almost all Christianity falls into that. Almost all of it.
Yeah. Yep.
The group is preoccupied with making money. At least in America, yes. I have not seen a church that does not take tithe.
Well, that's part of the Bible, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Members are expected to devote inordinate amounts of time to the group and group-related activities.
That's probably one of the oldest laws in the Bible.
The tithing one?
Yeah.
Yes. So members are expected to devote inordinate amount of times to the group or group-related activities. I think that one also depends. I think, well, actually, no. That one I think hits on almost all the time. Because if you just say church, like Wednesday and Sunday service, by my definition, that's an inordinate amount of time to be dealing with bullshit and lies. Yeah. So that one I'd be comfortable checking. Members are encouraged or required to live and or socialize with only other group members. That one, no. Not all Christianity hits that marker.
There isn't something in there that says shave your head and play a tambourine?
No, there's not not one in here that says shave your head and play tambourine.
That's the only thing that makes you in a cult, isn't it?
But I'd say that members being encouraged or required to live with and socialize only with other group members, that's exclusively to the more cult-like sections of Christianity, like, again, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness. And then the last one is the most loyal members, the quote-unquote true believers, feel there can be no life outside the context of the group. They believe there is no other way to be and often fear reprisals to themselves or others if they leave or even consider leaving the group. All Christianity falls under that one.
That just sounds like a lot of clean girlfriends or something. Jeez.
No, I think all Christianity falls under that 100% of the time. The minute, just the hell doctrine by itself makes that one a check mark for all. So there's about 2 or 3 lists in here that are characteristics associated with cult-like groups, and that's from Janja Lalique, PhD, and Michael D. Langone, PhD, also. Now, granted, I'm not trying to do an argument of authority saying, oh, they've got PhDs, they are the end-all, be-all, but there are aspects of cults, at least from this list, and I think it's the same list that Telltale and me and Steve use, that they just do not hit. There are some markers they don't hit. And if they don't hit all those markers, I don't count them myself.
Suris, you will drink Jim Beam extra aged bourbon.
I will drink extra aged bourbon.
You will tell everybody that they should start too.
Are we starting the cult of bourbon? Is that what we're doing?
Yeah.
So this is not bourbon. This is sweet tea. Can we start a cult of sweet tea instead? I'm from the South. This is like the drink that makes this area.
Bourbon or sweet tea?
Sweet tea.
Yeah. It is more. We're coffee up here.
Yeah.
Soda. Yeah. Christianity, there's a couple things in there that, because I would say back, if you went 200, 300 years back, it was probably a cult all the time, or there wasn't anybody that wasn't a cult.
Well, that's what Tacitus called it as well. Back in the day, he called them a cult that just sprung up as a splinter of Judaism.
Yeah, there's that the what do you call it, the forefathers, whatever the movement, I can't even, on the tip of my tongue, I can't even think of it right now.
He called it the Christus movement,
the knowledge movement, or whatever.
You can just go with the Richard Carrier definition. Just call it a mystery cult.
No, I'm talking about like 1776, right around there, though. The Enlightenment era. There we go.
So, Johnny, there's a question that is asked in the chat. There is one cult that hits all the marks, and it's statism. What is your stance on statism?
Statism? You know what? I'm not even sure.
I can say my stance on statism. I think if you think that the government is the supreme authority on anything, a quick look at history will prove that they're not, because our government allowed slavery. Just as one law. If we just take one law, slavery. So if you say, well, the government said that slavery is good, so slavery must be good because the government said it's good. If you're a statist, you have to take that stance.
Yep.
And you automatically are invalidated the minute that it changes that law. The minute that law changes. So I'd say that statism is not something that I think is healthy at all.
No, I think amendments are healthy.
I think for Snuffy Wuffy Kiss saying not all Christianity hits all the cult points, but it's still enough criteria across the board to be a cult. Again, I would say that if you want to use it as a colloquial term for a cult, sure, absolutely, that's fine. Like I said, my word for Christianity is still apocalyptic death cult. But as far as using the strictest definitions, if I had to be pinned down on the strict definitions of a cult,
doesn't meet
not
that.
all of it hits.
It definitely doesn't meet that rigorous definition. So yeah. I mean, it is and it isn't. It kind of is and it kind of isn't.
It just depends on what definitions you're holding yourselves to. Like I'll call myself an atheist until somebody drops a Stanford dictionary on me. The minute they do that, I have to hit agnostic.
I've just, let's put it this way.
No, I agree with
he doesn't exist.
You agree with Peach?
I agree with Peach.
Then I think we have maybe about 1 minute to answer one more question.
Oh, 1 minute? So another 40 minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
No más cervezas.
I don't know. If a question doesn't pop up in the chat, then Johnny, do you have anything you'd want to say?
I'd like to say it was a great great little talk here. I liked hearing about you guys' stories there. I almost say that I wish I would have gone down that road, but then again, it's like, yeah, maybe not. I'm kind of enjoying my life, so I had a pretty good life.
Beebs watching the clock. Well, it just hit 6:41, and I said 1 minute at 6:40, so I think that means it's time for me and Pam to play some League of Legends then, huh?
Alrighty then. Well, I'd like to say then, well, thanks, Suris, and thanks, Prophet Zod, for showing up here on the show. And
yeah, for the time he was able to be here. I'm glad we were able to kind of ad lib something afterwards.
Yeah. No, next time, you know what? Here's another thing. We should come up with a fallacy bingo card for watching videos. And somebody can win by naming,
yes,
covering all the fallacies on there. I think we should really
if you want to make fallacy bingo, we can do a fallacy bingo night.
We gotta do something like that. I think that'd be fun.
I think I would enjoy that as well.
If you got the right card, you know, get all random cards, whatever. You could set it up online to email everybody.
I'll have Steve. I'll ask Steve McCrae to help me make one.
That'd be great.
He knows more of the fallacies than I do.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do that. Anyway, we're gonna play fallacy bingo one of these weeks, people.
All right, we'll announce it on Twitter once we get the card made. We'll announce it on Twitter. We're at 2 minutes. Right. Okay, justice is clear. We get it. We are into minute 3.
And I'll have Purple Dan on tomorrow, everybody. So I don't know what time that is for sure. I forgot it now. I'll have to repost.
And Prophet of Zod and Godless Iowan have their stream tomorrow as well. After that.
Yep.
So we'll see you guys then.
Thanks everybody for stopping in. And this is Johnny DriveBYE saying peace out.
Insert end of video tagline here.